Hey, what's up? It's Michael. Yo, welcome to Comics on Canes. Hey, thank you so much for all the subs, all the watches. I love the interaction on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. So I appreciate all the love. But I actually heard our next guest on Locked on Canes. Dono is one of my favorite people. I love listening to him. And I heard Brad Tejeda on there. What's up, man? How are you?
Hey, man, a pleasure's always to talk some Kings football, especially with you, my guy, man. You do incredible things on a lot of different platforms, not just talking Kings football, man. So it's a great time to be here talking some Kings football with you, man.
I mean, it's a big week. This is a big week. We got Canes in Florida. I mean, let me get you, before we get to the keys to victory for each side, what is your thoughts about the game going in?
First and foremost, me being here, a Gainesville guy, I live up here in Gainesville, been living here most of my life. I was born in Miami, but, not only me, but I got my own family that I've created here. Got a son and a daughter. So being able to raise Canes in the city of Gainesville has been an amazing opportunity. Unfortunately, haven't been able to do much on the football field, but neither has Florida lately. So it's been okay. But going into this game, right, I think we all been patiently waiting for this. This is one of those opportunities that don't come by a lot, right? You look at the recent interview of Steve Spurrier, how this could have been one of those rivalries that should be on the docket every year, just like Florida State, Miami, Florida State, Florida. But, a while back, 1992, 1993, they looked at that SC schedule. They added teams like South Carolina and others. And there was a quote out there from him saying, hey, man, I don't think we should schedule these Miami guys anymore. Our schedule's already rough enough. Well, you fast forward to now here in 2024, Florida's got probably the hardest schedule in college football, especially in the new modern era. And they get to line it up against our boys and the Hurricanes back to back.
I love it.
Loving it. And I'm expecting a big outcome, man, a big game. I mean, this is going to be an atmosphere that most recent Hurricane fans like myself, you have not experienced an atmosphere like this probably since about 2017 when we played Virginia Tech, Notre Dame back-to-back weeks in the Hard Rock, right? I was front row, got the privilege to be at both of those games. You're going to experience an atmosphere very similar to this. I was at College Station as well a couple years back. It's going to be more intense than that. The way the stadium structure is built, the way the crowd of Florida is, they're very similar to Alabama fans, man. First game of the year, they're going to have fans traveling from all over the country for this game because, as we know, as bad as they were last year, it's a brand new season, 0-0 for both programs. And I think, man, Miami's going to have to go into this game very prepared. We'll get into the keys later on, man. But
yeah, we'll get into. I want to get your prediction at the end of the podcast. What you think the final score is going to be? But who do you want to start with? Miami's keys to victory or Florida's?
Let's go with the opponent first, right?
Yes, please.
I think first and foremost, this is a Florida team. You ask their fan base and you look at the media around them. They're banking on their atmosphere, right? Going into the swamp, 330 humidity. It's going to be hot out there. Well, guess what? We're from Miami, man. We're used to the hot and humidity. This is stuff on Greentree that we work on every single day. So something like that isn't going to phase us. Now, the atmosphere, the crowd, of course, that's something that you can't just game plan on. So I'm expected to Miami to have a few things, wrinkles that they're going to have to adjust to. The new communication with the headset will be one. But when it comes to Florida, right, the key for Florida is going to have to be to protect Graham Mertz. This is a quarterback that got sacked 31 times last year, which was 20 more times in the previous year with AR at quarterback, who obviously is in the NFL now and a lot more mobile. In 5 years in college, Graham Mertz has never thrown over 20 touchdowns in a season, right? So one of the other big things for Florida, especially this year, is going to be having to create big play opportunities. When you look at Graham Mertz and who he is as a quarterback, not only at Florida last year, where he had probably his best career statistic-wise, not only for him personally, but any quarterback in college football. This is a guy that threw 73% completion percentage, 2,900 yards and 20 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions. So the guy is super efficient. But when you dig deep, not only at Wisconsin, but at Florida, the way he's schemed with offenses, it's a lot of very quick passes, sweeps. They're going to be scheming a lot of things toward the big play opportunities may not be there. So they're going to have to create many diverse things with guys like Eugene Wilson, and a possible Montreal Johnson, who's their bell cow running back. Losing a guy like Trevor Etienne to Georgia was a big-time blow. But with Montreal Johnson at running back, I think it's going to be more of a running back by committee for Florida. And they're really going to have to try to depend on that, because I just don't see their offense being able to have more than 3 seconds to throw a football, which
They
is something what Graham Mertz is used to.
like they don't. I mean, even in offseason, they were talking about how bad their line was, and even if that's not true, I believe this defensive line. I don't want to sound like Florida State and get ran up all over, but I don't think it's going to happen. I've heard analysts say this could be the best defensive line, just depth and everything in all of the country. And the only people that were saying that about Florida State was pretty much Florida State. But people have come out saying, I mean, and it's in the numbers. I mean, Barrow, Barron, Akeem Messidor is back, Ruben Bain. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So I just can't see an offensive line that has what they got, 2 returners?
Now, so they got
2 or 3?
they got 2 returners. They got a left tackle in Austin Barber, who's coming off an injury, who's a guy that's, in my opinion, who regressed every year since his
Yeah.
freshman year. And then they have a center in Jake Slaughter, who had a pretty good year last year. But when you look at the offensive linemen, I mean, this is a Florida team that has always had 2 offensive line coaches since Billy Napier has been there. He brought an offensive lineman from Louisiana his first year coming to Florida, and Osiris Torrance, who was a first-team All-American. So kudos to that. But ever since then, the guy hasn't really developed or gotten any big-time recruits at Florida, especially in the trenches. And I mean, in this game alone, I think the trenches is going to be one of the number one factors in this football
100%.
game, especially when you get to the third and fourth quarter, man. I mean, you rambled off some of the names we got at defensive linemen. We got 4 guys, not including Ruben Bain, that have over 100 career tackles. Florida has not one guy on their defensive line that has that type of production. So to your point, you mentioned Florida State. Florida State was in a very similar situation before they lined up at week 0, right? They got guys from Georgia. They got guys from Alabama. But when you really look deep and dive into the stats, there was no productivity there. And you saw it very quickly against Georgia Tech. You could say the same thing for some of these guys for Florida, not necessarily the transfer portal guys they brought in, but a lot of these young guys that are freshmen and sophomore all throughout their football roster that are now going to be starters for their program. These are guys that have never started a college football snap. These are guys that maybe have less than 20 tackles in their career, not even one start in a college program. These are going to be the guys that Florida are going to be relying on to take every single snap against a Miami roster that not only are we deep, but even our backup guys are coming from quality programs that already have quality production.
And I didn't even mention Alston. I mean, the dude rated PP, as the highest rated defensive guy out there. So there's a lot going on with the Canes. Is there any advantage that the offense has, Florida's offense has, over our defense, or none?
I will say this. Billy Napier can definitely get creative when it comes to play calling, right? I'm not going to say he's as creative as a Dan Mullen, in my opinion, but he is a guy that understands the strengths and the weaknesses of your quarterback, right? And I think, freshman guy and TJ Lagway, I think, anybody that follows recruiting, this is a guy that's going to be a name to watch, but I don't think it's going to be a name to watch week 1. I don't think he's quite ready yet. Will there be some TJ Lagway packages? Possibly. There's going to be some things that Billy Napier and this offense are going to throw at Miami's defense that we're just not going to be able to expect or see. It's going to be up to us to be able to adjust and put the right guys in place. And I think overall, it's just the quality of guys that Miami is bringing back on the defensive side of the ball that is really going to help. I mean, this is a top 25 defense from last season where Florida was right under 70.
All right, let's flip it. How about Florida's defense against our offense?
Florida's defense is against our offense, man. I think first and foremost, the trenches, right? We talked a little bit about our trenches, but let's go back to the production and the guys that Florida's going to be relying on. I mean, again, defensive line group, it's not just 4 guys, all 4 quarters. You better have 8 to 10 guys that you could heavily rotate because, like I said before, third, fourth quarter, 3:30 in the swamp, it's going to be hot and humid, and you got to make sure you're bringing in new guys in left and right. That's where it's going to be a huge gap, in my opinion, when it comes to Miami and Florida. Not only because of the guys that our offensive line are practicing up against day in and day out on Greentree to the names we mentioned, but Florida's defensive line isn't going to have nearly the amount of experienced guys on the offensive side of the ball that they've been practicing up against. And when you really dig deep into the production of those guys, it's really not there, man. I mean, you talk about a guy in Caleb Banks, who they're relying very heavily on the interior defensive line this year. 2 years of college football, 2 sacks, and only 21 total career tackles. Not very good, right? Kid and Tyreek Sapp from St. Thomas Aquinas, who Miami fans know pretty familiar with. 2 years of college football, only 2 sacks and 44 tackles. They got another guy in Justice Boone, who's supposed to be their anchor on the defensive end this year. Didn't play any college football last year. And in 3 years of college football, he only has 1.5 sacks. So, I mean, the production of those guys that they are going to have to rely on snap after snap. And these are our starter guys. Not even to mention, guys that might be in the rotation who I don't even know who those guys are.
Well,
I think between defensive line and linebackers, man, that's really going to be where it's at.
Well, we talk about depth on the defensive line, and we saw it last year with Miami's defense where Reuben Baines started off great, but then as the season went on, he had to play more and more but in different positions because people kept falling out the lineup, and you just get tired towards the end of the season. His production kind of fell off towards the end because he was used so much in so many different places because they didn't have any depth. So I think that's going to be a very, very big deal, especially in the swamp. Now let's go to keys to victory for Miami. I'm gonna throw out my first key to victory. I mean, in the swamp, you got to start off fast.
All right.
I honestly am so bullish on the Canes in the trenches. I even said it in my last podcast. I honestly believe, and I don't want this to happen, but the Canes could turn the ball over 3 or 4 times and still beat Florida. That's how bad I think they're going to spank them. But what's your keys to victory for Miami?
It's funny you mentioned that too, because I think we all remember back in 2019 in Orlando, Miami first Florida, we had a left tackle by the name of Zion Nelson, who was a true freshman, didn't weigh more than 260 pounds soaking wet. And I think he gave up almost 20 sacks by himself. And we were still in that ball game till the end. And it was one of the things that you mentioned, turnovers, which I got to agree with you, man. That was one of my 3 keys to victory for Miami is winning the turnover battle. Whether it's limiting the turnovers on offense, as we know, Cam Ward, one of the only things that is a weakness for Cam Ward is fumbles, right? He is one of a high-rated guy at quarterback when it comes to fumbling. We don't know what the weather's going to be like up here in Gainesville. It's a Tuesday right now, and it has poured and rained almost every single day while I've been up here. So that's one of the things as well. Also on defense, you got to limit the turnovers, right? Special teams. One question I want to get to ask you before I get to my second key.
Yeah.
One thing me and a lot of Cane fans have been arguing about, right? When Miami is back at the premier top of tops, our special teams is no doubt one of the best in America. We always are scoring either on the punt or kick return. We're knocking heads off on the other end. Looking at this first game against Florida in the swamp, do you think someone like Chris Johnson or another young guy should get these punt returns? Or do you personally think that X needs to get at punt return just because of the sheer fact that we know he's not going to drop the ball?
Well, I mean, what game did we see last year where the punt fumble cost us the game? Like the whole thing, I get that Miami was great with Devin Hester. Guess what? Nobody on that team is Devin Hester right now. Right now. Could be. Chris Johnson could be. We don't know. Ray could be. We don't know. But do you really want to put a guy back there at the swamp catching punts that's never caught him in a game? Or do you want to just catch the punt?
I'm right there with you. I think your biggest asset for the Miami Hurricanes is Cam Ward, right? You need to make sure he gets as many opportunities as possible. And the last thing you need is to get a good 3 and out where you need it the most. And then they get the ball right back within the 15, 20-yard line because of a fumble. And that's one less opportunity for Cam Ward in this offense.
And I also say this. Look, your next 3 games after Florida, put whoever you want back there. Against Florida A&M, the other – that's where you try out people. And who knows, Chris Johnson, Ray, or put Nycar back there. Let's see. Those games see what happened. And if one of those guys develop in the next 3 games, I'm all for it. But I go in the first game in the swamp, we know how turnovers are, how that crowd will get into the game. And I necessarily, I played some college football, but not in that big of a capacity. But I know one thing, playing football, once you're on the field, you don't hear the noise.
True.
Unless it's going bad, you know what I mean? Or you're doing great. Like when that football, when they say hut and it's the action, that crowd disappears. Like you don't hear that.
And it's funny that you mentioned the crowd and the noise because that's going to my second point of a key. Winning the turnover margin is one, but the second thing is communication. I
Mhm.
for one, the environment of the crowd atmosphere. Again, you could practice and simulate as much as you want on Green Tree, but unfortunately, once the game is started, it's going to be a totally different atmosphere. I
Yeah.
think that the great thing about this year and the opportunity we have as Miami Hurricane fans is we have a quarterback that has been in those type of environments,
Yes.
whether it was against Oregon, against Washington. And not only has he won some of those games, but he's a guy that's never been rattled in those moments. He's a guy that feeds off of the pressure. And that is something that us as Miami fans at the quarterback position, we're not used to, right? We're used to a quarterback throwing back-to-back picks, going on the sideline and going all the way to the opposite side of the bench with his head down, not communicating with anybody, right? So I
We're
think
used to a quarterback throwing 12 interceptions in 5 games.
right, more interceptions than sacks.
Yes. Yes.
so
100%.
So I think, the communication, I know the new headset rule is going to be something implemented, but I have been curious. I've been hearing a lot of interviews, right? Not only for Miami coaches, but something that has been all across college football, because this is something new, not just for Miami, it's for everybody. There are going to be a lot of times where this headset that people are now starting to rely on, the communication is not always going to be consistent. There's going to be some lagging, and there's going to be some opportunities where you're not going to be able to hear what they're saying. So you need to
And it,
have
it
a
and
backup plan. You're
and
going
it's
to need
going
a
to cut
backup
off.
plan. Yeah,
And it cuts off.
it cuts off. So you're going to need some type of backup plan. So the fact that I'm already hearing from our coaching staff that those things are already implemented, to where when those things happen, it's not going to be something in a future press conference where it gets thrown out where, hey, this is one of the reasons why. I don't want to hear any excuses. Let's line
Yeah.
up and play football. So I think communication is the second thing, especially with the players. You got a lot of new guys in the secondary where I think as big names, James Williams and Cam Kitchens were, there was a lot of communication issues back there that really hurt us in some big time plays. And that goes to my third one. You got to win the big play opportunity. Florida
Yep.
and Miami are both going to have to try to make big plays in order to win the football game, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Like I said before in the beginning of the show, Graham Mertz is a quarterback along with Billy Napier, they do not create big plays. So it's going to be very key to them to where when they make these trick plays, when they do these reverses and quick sweeps, those have to be their big play opportunities, because I don't see any other way that they will create those. And then going to Miami's end, you got Cam Ward at quarterback. You look at the numbers, he's a gunslinger. He's a guy that loves to create big play opportunities. And Shannon Dawson as an OC, when we first got him, TVD and him, it was supposed to be, big play after big play. We're going deep. That never happened, right? This is the year where it really has to get it done. And I think we got to create big plays on offense.
Well, it never happened. Well, it happened in man-to-man until they started playing zone. And that's when everything just collapsed. That's when everything collapsed. All right, man. Brad, let's give your final score and give a little rundown of how you think it's going to happen.
Yeah, man. I think final score, if I had to give one right now, man, I'm going around 35-38 as far as Miami score. Florida score, I don't think they get more than 20 points, man. I'd say 17 or 20, so maybe 35-17, 35-20 to the Canes. I just think, man, again, by that third quarter, I would say about 5-6 minutes left, man, in that
Yep.
third quarter, you're really going to see a huge change in depth, just overall quality guys that this team and this roster that Miami and Mario has finally built. We're not even 100% there yet, but it just goes to show you the amount of caliber guys that Mario is bringing in, from a physical stature, productivity stature. It's going to be night and day, man. I cannot wait to see some of these younger guys like OJ Romanes Frederic get some early playing time in his first game. Cole McConaughey, Cameron Bobby Pruitt, Elijah Lofton. I mean, we got guys, and that's just the young guys, not even to mention all the guys we've been talking about in the show, man. But I can't wait. I got row one, so I can't wait for this.
That's
game.
amazing, man. That's amazing. Well, I'm kind of on your level. I think the score will be 41-10 with like 3 minutes left, and then Florida will get a cheap touchdown because nobody really cares. So I think it'll be like 41-17. I can't see it being close because, like you said, our trenches are like, I really think it's going to be one of the best in the country until proven otherwise. And hopefully I'm not sitting here like Florida State next week, which I don't think is going to happen. Also, I believe Florida State has a culture problem because we saw them get blown out by Georgia because they didn't make the playoffs. That just showed you those players were just in it for the money, and then they bounced. Where I feel we have players in it for the money, but I feel like there's a culture there. I feel like Mario has built a strong wall there, and I can't see it being close. Like I said, if it's tied at halftime, that's a problem. But I can't see this game being close at all because of the trenches. So hopefully we're right, and hopefully you get to be front row to see it all and throwing up the U, baby.
Absolutely, man. I can't wait. And hey, man, Florida was one of the worst teams in the country last year, leading at the end of the third quarter to go in the fourth quarter. They blew a lot of wins last year. So hey, man, I'm good with that. As long as we get the W, I'm all for it, man. I can't wait, and I appreciate you for letting me chop it up and talk some Canes football.
How can people find you, man?
At X, Twitter, however you want to call it, man. At Tejeda Brad. That's at TEJEDABRAD. You can follow me also on Canes Insight, man. We're doing a lot of amazing stuff on there.
You got a party.
Yeah, we got a huge show and a huge party Friday night, man, up in here in Gainesville from 5 to 7 at V Pizza. I'll have a lot of former alumni, some great guests, some great raffle prizes, and then we'll be partying up with Canesville till 2 in the morning. My guy Lamar Thomas, as y'all know, will be hosting a live event there. We'll have Sebastian the Ibis, maybe some cheerleaders there, man. So it's going to be a great time.
Is your party already sold out? The one that had like 75 people?
It is sold out, unfortunately.
Nice, bro.
It is. Hey, man, I'm all for it, man. I'm just glad that we got a bunch of Cane fans that are ready to party it up, man. And it's nuts. This is a college town. It turns upside down when Florida football starts, and we're on Tuesday. And I can tell you, man, this city is crickets right now. I think they're not ready for what's about to happen on Saturday.
They're not ready. They're not ready. Hey, Brad Tejeda, man, thank you so much for your time, man, and we'll talk soon.